Welcome to the Gentleman Project Podcast. I'm Corey Moore.
And I'm Kirk Chugg. This morning in the podcast studio, we have Jason Sisneros. Jason and I have known each other for about 6 years, and I've had the privilege to make some of his suits and stage outfits that he uses for speaking, coaching. He's got his own podcast. He's an author. He's worked for big companies, you guys. Nike, Microsoft, Comcast. He is a turnaround artist. He loves to come into small businesses and make them mid-cap sized businesses. He's done that over 100 times. He's called the Architect, the Bald Avenger. You name it, this guy is just prone to great nicknames. He's got a brand all about standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves, which is one of the reasons that I think he's going to be a really great podcast guest today on the Gentleman Project, because we talk a lot about character. We talk about standing up for those people who can't stand up for themselves. And Jason is neck deep in some of these projects and working with nonprofits in a very, very intimate way and very involved on how to help those people who need help, and really garner some good information from him today on how to be gentlemen.
Excited to be here.
Yep.
Talk to you handsome folks. And by the way, all of my suits, not just some of my suits, all of them. I think you'd get mad at me if I cheated on you with another haberdasher.
I don't know if he'd get mad, but he might be greatly disappointed.
He would.
And plus, you always look good in him. I've seen you speak before, and he's a very powerful speaker. By the way, it's a really, really great speaker. If you're looking, are you speaking all the time now?
All
places,
the time.
okay,
yeah, all the time. I mean, obviously, there's a lot going on, and you know the things. There's multiple subjects to talk about.
I also follow Jason on social media since the first time I saw him speak, which was actually at like a pre-Oscar thing. I don't even remember that.
It was
awesome.
Yeah. You look great in your suit too.
Well, Kirk's good at his job.
He is good.
And it was really inspiring speech, and there were some other great speakers. But the thing that I've noticed the most since knowing you is that you're constantly focused on your kids.
Always.
I see that.
Yeah.
You can just tell,
yeah.
right? So talk to us about your kids and what being a father to you is all about. And then we can get into some other things.
Okay. We have been excited to come and talk to you guys. You're both absolutely gentlemen. And I respect, how you are with your family and how you show up for your communities and your businesses. I love it. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. My kids, it's interesting because I think that most of us we're born into whatever situation that we're born into. Mine, I was born into having an adopted father at 6 years old that was super abusive and pretty mean. And, sitting around, he would beat me up so bad. I started stepping in front of my mom when I was like 7 or 8 years old to, try to take her beatings. And when I would be in my room, recovering, I used to think about like what kind of a dad I could be, whenever I got married and whenever I had kids and read the Bible. My grandma always made sure I had a Bible with me. So I used to read those stories, not from a religious standpoint, but more from a standpoint of education, stories, some hope to connect to, right? It was a different thing for me. And I got those lessons sort of embedded in me. And I used to just sit there and in recovery and just think, what kind of a dad could I be when I got to be a dad? And then I had my first son, and it was interesting because I was involved in, some criminal activity back in those days. Cause I think you do what you know, and that's what my family, it was sort of a crime family. And it was interesting because the week that he was born, I was having to make some decisions to leave the life that I was in. And the very night that I decided to leave, I got stabbed in the chest. I've got a scar all the way across my chest. And after that happened, as soon as the knife went in, I had this thought, and it was from the Bible. It was a Bible verse that popped into my head, and it was, the sins of the father are born onto the children. And I was like, no more. If I survive this, I'm not doing this anymore. And walked away from it and started to build a life on the right side of the law. More importantly, I believe that my children, my first son and then the subsequent kids, have been a real leverage point for me to be a better man, so that the name Sisneros could mean something to them, and embed all of those core values. And it's been men like you and mentors of mine that I've just just learn from and absorb like a sponge. How do you be a good dad? How do you be a good father? How do you be a good man in society? And it's been a great journey. I love my kids more than anything, and protect them and raise them up and do what I can.
There's a lot of questions that I have, because I think the backstory of where you came from is really what makes you who you are today, and standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
A couple of those things that you're involved with is like CERT Ministries and Feed a Billion. He's the CEO of Feed a Billion, which is a nonprofit whose goal is to feed 1 billion meals.
Yeah.
Like that's an astronomical number. I don't think any of us really can comprehend how many meals that is, but these are for people who suffer from food insecurity, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing with that, and maybe a little bit about why your background drew you to that.
So I think the foundation, I've been asked this question a lot, and it took me a while. In fact, this last year, I finally sort of landed on, what it is that I am against, because I just don't like bullies. So it's really an anti-bully sort of platform. I feel like my adopted father taught me so many great ways of how not to be a man. And he was a bully. He only picked on those that were weaker than him. And so I saw that, and I can recognize that behavior. And in today's society, we see it all around us, where we're teaching people to be victims. Like it's a professional victimhood society that we live in now. And when I look at what is a victim, trafficking children, the food insecurity, domestic violence stuff, the veteran subjects that I'm involved in, I see this underpinning of the fact that they've had choice ripped out of their life, and they're being used by people with more power and more strength than they have. And that's, to me, that's a real victim, is somebody that has had choice ripped out of their life. Everybody else, if we're black, if we're white, if you're gay, if you're all of these other things, you have a choice. You're still living in a free society here in the United States. And we all have things that happen to us, right? We were talking about it right before the podcast, is, there's always little things that are happening to everybody all the time. And those things, I believe, are meant to make us stronger. And the people that have gone through the most and can still be loving human beings are the ones that are stronger in their broken places, right? So the things that I'm involved in really are just to stand up to those bullies. And, and my adopted father, whatever he was trying to do to destroy me as a human being, made me stronger. And I'm stronger in those broken places, like most people, like your listeners, right? It's you may be carrying around some shame or some mistake that you made, or something that happened to you, something that you did to somebody else. And the world tells us to stop there and to be guilty and don't succeed from that point. Don't excel from that point. And they're using your greatest strength against you. Right. And I think that that's a great message for people to take away from this conversation, is that if you stand on that strength and you are transparent and you talk about it and you find the people that are suffering in that same place, you can be of tremendous value, right? Tremendous value. And that's what I find the best about, whether we're kicking in a door to go, take down a bad guy and grab some kids, or putting teeth back in a woman's mouth who lost her teeth from an abusive father or abusive husband, or feeding these children around the world. They now know that somebody's looking for them. Somebody is there to help. And I think that's a call on all men's lives, is to be that leader, to be that servant leader, to step up. And I believe that's where joy lives.
Everything's got a common denominator for you.
Yes.
Because you just described why I see you, like, not spread thin, but if somebody didn't know who you were, they would say, oh, man, he's involved with a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But that common denominator of standing up for somebody, and really the despising of a bully, making sure that doesn't happen to people, I think is admirable. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting, because it does spawn from that core understanding. But you also, on the other side of it, this is what Pastor Rudy has taught me in the last couple of years. And it's a hard lesson, guys, which is you have to love the bully as well, because what made my adopted father like that? right? What makes these traffickers sell these kids? What makes the abuser? And I'm still not there, to be honest with you. I'm not where Pastor Rudy is. He loves them. I mean, obviously we will do violent things to protect the innocent, and do the things that are necessary. But as soon as that's over and he gets a chance to talk to these people, it's amazing to watch him pray with them. And again, I'm not there yet. I haven't reached that level of evolution. I'm still very angry at them. But to watch him, he believes, and rightfully so, that when you take a trafficker and you take them out of the game by turning them a different direction, you now save so many more children that won't be trafficked because that person has changed their life. So grace for those people it's something I'm working on. But it was a changer with my adopted father. Rather than they always say forgiveness is very powerful, which I agree it is. But forgiveness is almost like excusing somebody for their bad behavior. Becoming grateful for my adopted father was really the master step. Finding how I'm so grateful that he was my dad, because he turned me into the person that I am today, somebody that I can be proud of, somebody that my kids can be proud of, and setting a legacy for them to uphold. For standing up for people that can't stand up for themselves.
You've already talked about some pretty deep stuff here. Love what you just said about loving people who, quite frankly, you would automatically probably
withhold love from,
hate or judge or whatever. And everyone has their own background, and I think most people can change. But we're talking about heavy stuff here. Right. You're not talking about, when you start talking traffickers, it's pretty hard for me to get my head around, loving someone like that. Right. Yeah. I'm like you that way. Yeah. So I appreciate you saying that, because I think for me and for the listeners, hearing that there's a higher level of forgiveness, right? Where how can you actually be thankful or grateful for these people? That's tough. Yeah. So, but I think right. And I think a lesson for those listening, and certainly for our kids. And I loved also what you said about the victim thing. I think there's a lot of people in this world with a lot of choices who are acting as though they're victims, right, when they still have choice. Yep. Now there are choices that are taken from some people that are like really taking their choice. I like the way you said that. I'm always talking to my kids about happiness as a choice. It's very similar to don't be a victim. Right. It's just like you can choose most of the time your reaction to dang near anything, right? Yep. Unless, all your choices or most of your choices have been taken from you. And even then I go back to one of my favorite books, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, right? I think I'm saying that right. But he was in a concentration camp. Right. Same thing, family taken, pretty much just enough food to stay alive, right? And no respect, just beaten and the whole 9 yards. And the only thing he said he had left was his ability to choose for himself, his attitude. Right. And his ability to think about, well, what if I got out of here someday? What would I look forward to? Things like that, right? Yeah. And so even when everything's been taken from you, which is super easy for me to say and much harder to do. Right. Right. But even then there's people who have figured out a way to, I'm going to find a path. I'm going to find a way through this. Yeah. So I'm restating all this, and I'm thinking about my kids. Yeah. Listen, kids, listen. Like I haven't listened to the podcast, right? So this is really, really good stuff that you're putting out there.
I love the book very, very much. There's two things that come out of it that have really changed my life. One is a compelling future, right? It's the concept of really getting, it's funny because I've done turnarounds of businesses for years and years and years. And one of the things that has always shocked me, and up into Elon Musk conversation I just recently heard, is that most business owners don't realize why they're doing what they're doing. Right. They start because they have to take care of their family. They start. And I don't know, about 8 years ago, I realized nobody knows why they're playing the game. Right. That compelling future concept of why am I going to put in the hours? Why am I going to risk to own a business? Why am I going to go through the rough times? Why am I going to go through the COVID? Like those types of things that we're missing that compelling future. And then what is that compelling future? It is freedom. It's the presence of a multitude of choices, right? And we don't sit down and we don't say, okay, well, I'm going to do this because, I want a house that's paid off. I want a car. I want to be able to travel. And I want to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it with the people that I want to do it with. We get caught up like it's, okay, I'm making more money. That's great. I'm going to live in a bigger house, which means I'm going to be in debt at a higher level. I'm just broke at a higher level.
Right.
Right. And so when we started from that position and we said, let's get clear on the outcome, right? Let's get clear on what you're actually playing the game for. It changed the game on the consulting side of what we do, right? So now we know why we're playing the game. We understand that it doesn't actually take that much money in an investment account or whatever it is to be able to set you free. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to stop doing what you do. Right? I work harder, more hours today than I did when I owned my companies before I sold, right? I work more hours, but I'm loving it. Rather than saying what keeps you up at night, I want to know what gets you up in the morning. What is that inspiration? What is that, and that passion? And if you get caught up in the making of this, the money, you get lost. You lose a chunk of your soul, right? And that thing that's called passion, where it comes from. So compelling future is one thing that I love. And then there's a line in there that reminds me of Paul in the Bible, which was, I was more free than my captors, because of that choice that you just said. Right? I am choosing joy. If you spend any time with me whatsoever, people will tell you the one thing I guard is my joy. You can't touch it. And everybody's like, well, how are you getting death threats for this? And, the cartel's sending you beheading videos and you're doing all this other kind of stuff. How do you keep a smile on your face? Well, it's because they don't get to touch it. I tell all the people all the time, you can't offend me because I only have one emotion and it's buried under a mountain of unresolved issues. so you can't have it.
We need to put that on a poster, right?
Yeah. And so it's always a choice. And I think that's the thing that sets people free. Number one, what does your freedom look like? It has a price tag to it. It has a series of behaviors that is attached to it. And then what are you going to do with that freedom? Right. And understanding the entire time, there is nothing that's beset against you that you can't overcome by choosing joy in the moment. It's just, there's more tools in that than being, I'm stressed, the government, who's president right now? Oh, my skin color. Oh, all of these things that are beset against us. We as humans make it really, really easy. And I'm going to shut up. You guys got me on a roll here.
This is great stuff. Keep going.
But we as humans, we make it really easy. I mean, we talked about it again at the beginning. We make it really easy to be miserable. So easy. We don't have no rules. We're like, if they look at me wrong, if they, if the sun doesn't come up, if my check doesn't cash, all of these things, we're like, I'm miserable. And people, it's the lowest level of vibration, the lowest level of connection for humans to say, oh, how's your day? It sucks. Oh, how's your day? It sucks too. Great. We can commiserate together. There's no honor in that. There's no honor in being in that pool, but humans make it that's the easiest part. And then to be happy, we have all of these incredible list of rules to be happy. The sun has to come up at this time. My wife has to smile at me. My kids have to be perfect, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll be happy. Mm-hmm. Right. And then I'll finish with this Elon Musk thing that I was talking about. I was listening to an interview that he did on Clubhouse, and not very many people caught it, but it shocked me because it was around the time that I was really coming to the conclusion that people need to choose their compelling outcome, or else they're prisoners to to whatever they're working in. And the guy asked him, you're listening, a bunch of entrepreneurs are listening to you right now. Tell us what do we need to do to be as successful as you? And he thought about it. Love Elon's honesty, right? In the moment, he said, he thought about it for a second and he goes, I don't suggest this for anybody. And I thought, man, because he said, I have every minute of my day is locked up. Every decision that I make is consequential. He is a prisoner to not knowing what he actually wants out of his own life. And if Elon at that level of success is miserable, why have it? What's the point? Right? Love the book that brought all those two things: compelling future, understanding what it is, and then I am more free than my captor.
Yeah, and I have to say, I love the way you put, are you giving yourself more freedom? Are you giving yourself more choices? I haven't ever had it been put that way before.
Yeah.
But again, through the eyes of my kids and the listeners, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, whether you're 6 or 60,
right?
If you're asking yourself, how can I give myself more choices and more freedom, which is really what we're all saying when we say we want to be a success.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I love that. I haven't thought of it that way. So this is a new paradigm for me, which I love. Thanks for giving that to us.
My pleasure.
Yeah. I mean, if you're 6 and you don't clean your room and the consequence is you can't play with your friends, or you're 16 and you get in trouble on social media, whether it's just on your own and no one knows about it, or whether your parents or you name it, are you giving yourself more choices or less choices?
Right.
Right. If you're working your butt off and you're an entrepreneur, and then you go and buy a fancy car and a house and are more in debt, which makes you work more, to your point, are you giving yourself more choices? That'd be a great question for anyone to ask themselves at any moment in their life.
Yep.
Is the decision I'm making today with my kid, with my job, with my wife, whatever, is it going to give me more choice and freedom or less choice and freedom?
Yep.
That's a fantastic.
Am I just prettying up my cell? Right. My
Right.
cell.
I love that. I just love that.
It's something that happened. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but it was within the last year or two. You had mentioned Pastor Rudy. Yeah. We like to talk about people in our lives who are mentors that have really made an impact for us. And as I've known you and watched you talk about faith and this close relationship with Pastor Rudy, who's involved with CERT Ministries, I just kind of wanted to wrap that explanation up for the listeners that don't know you very well.
Right.
Talk to us about what you've learned from him and how faith has played that role in changing you into the man you are now.
It's a great question. I'm so grateful, again, for all the mentors that have entered my life. And Pastor Rudy came along. So my Christian walk was, I never really was religious. When I was reading the Bible, it was, I feel like I've always had a connection to God, but I wasn't into the, like, you show up to church and, and you do all that stuff. So then I became a born again Christian in 99, 2000 area, and went through, consequently, I went through some of the worst times of my life. I lost my businesses. I went bankrupt 3 times, with the 3 businesses I was running. My wife had a kid with another guy. Like there was all of this stuff that was falling apart. My standing in the town that I was in, it fell apart. I mean, thank God it all did, by the way. But as I started to decline in how the world saw me, the church that I was going to and the people that I was around, they shunned me, which is the exact opposite of what Jesus says to do. Right? We're supposed to wash the feet of prostitutes and people that are homeless and, those types of things as servant leaders. And I just saw, and it turned me off, and it actually made me mad at God. It made me mad at Jesus. And I was like, I'm done with this. I mean, this is a big falsehood. It's all fake and, and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I was when I met. Still, I repaired my relationship because I've always had, God to talk to, without a pastor being, involved. But when I met Pastor Rudy, that was the first conversation I had with him. I said, I would love to work with you guys. I've been with like 12 other rescue units, and I would love to go out with you guys and see what you're all about. And I didn't stay with those other rescue units because of the integrity level that I found. There's just always something off, that didn't kind of align with the purity of what we're supposed to be doing when we're going after these kids. And I said, but don't come at me with that Jesus stuff. Let me tell you, pounding my chest, being an idiot. And he's like, yeah, cool. No problem. And then I watched for 2 years. I watched him and his family, his 2 daughters, his wife, and him demonstrating what I read in the Bible as a kid, like the way that we're supposed to be with people, the non-judgmental part of being a Christian, the really falling in love with other people's outcome, like service, like understanding. I just watched and saw joy exists in service of other people, right? I have a philosophy that says, you're born to become the best you can be, which means we're going to read books. We're going to improve ourselves. We're going to, work on our skill sets. And that's where most of the world stops. It's a very lonely, selfish place to be just in that. I'm going to be the best me I can be. Look at my cars, look at my house, look at the success, look at all the things, look at my fancy suits, right? These, which we want. You want fancy suits. Yeah. But we get stuck there, and then we go, is this all there is? This is very empty. Right. And that's where people start drinking, or they start, cheating, or they start whatever it is to ease the pain of not understanding that line that's right in front of you is all those skill sets are supposed to be built up so that you can serve other people. And that's where joy lives, right? It lives in that space when you're serving other people with no expectation of anything in return, not building your reputation, not building your wealth or whatever it is. It's like pure service is where joy exists. And if you're doing that on a constant basis, there's really no opportunity to feel miserable. So, I lost track on what this. Oh, Pastor Rudy. Okay. Sorry. But so I watched Pastor Rudy over a couple of years. I've been with him now, I guess we're going into our 5th year now, 4th or 5th year. And I just watched him, and I watched his family, and I watched miracles happen on the rescues that we were doing. Like, we were looking for this girl we've been looking for a couple years, and we were in this city, and we have basically 3 parts of the ministry. We have our service, our support group. We have us that are the operators that go out and actually do the rescue. And then we have like a tech team, right? That's helping us along the way. And so we were out looking for this girl, and the prayer group calls us up and says, hey, have you guys looked at the hospitals? And we're like, no, we haven't thought about that. They're like, we're getting a strong message to go look at the hospitals. So we went there was 2 hospitals in the city. Went to the first one, nobody. Second one, nobody. And we were like very, very defeated because we all had to go home the next day. And we thought for sure we're going to find this girl on this trip. And so we go across, we're going to gassing up our cars, and one of our operators looks over and goes, I think that's her. Right? I think that's her. And sure enough, it was. And we surrounded, this is right in the middle of all the BLM riots and, all the stuff where, our team is primarily white guys, right? And we're in the middle of a whole bunch of communities of color because this is where a lot of these rescues are being done. And so we surround this car, and I'm thinking to myself, what a miracle. What a miracle, just listening, like watching that power happen. And I watched Big Mike, he's like 6'7", 400 pounds. Like, he stood post right by this girl's window. And it was one of the coldest nights that I think I've experienced on any rescue ever. And he's standing there, and we're all waiting for the police to show up, to support us. And he stood there for an hour, and then 2 hours. And she finally rolls down the window, and she says, looks at him, and she goes, aren't you cold? And he goes, oh yeah, definitely cold. It's freezing out here. And she goes, I can't believe all of this is for me. And he goes, baby girl, you've had 37 people looking for you for a couple of years. We love you. And she started crying. I feel like crying right now. Everybody was bawling. She gets out of the car, goes and goes with our female rescue team. And it was just an amazing story. And I watched that happen over and over and over again. I feel the Spirit. We do a prayer thing before we go out on missions, and you just feel this power without me, assigning myself the name Christian. And finally I was like, this is what this is about. This is what it's supposed to be about, right? Service and humility and so then Pastor Rudy then about 2 years ago, baptized me. And I've never been baptized. I'm 50 years old right now. So I was 48 at the time. And so I really admire him because of his reflection of what we're supposed to be as Christians. Right. And I just would follow him anywhere he goes. I know he's always got our best interests in mind, doesn't mind. Like some of the things that we've done and seen and, bullets that we've dodged and all of these kind of things, it's just God's with us. And Pastor Rudy, I think, is a man of God, and he's another mentor for me to emulate the good things that he does, right? I always look for what can I emulate in the people that are around me. You two gentlemen, right? Being here, the podcast that you put out, the goodness that you put out, the service to your community, the love for children, for families, for fathers, for mothers, for generational understanding is so admirable. And I want to be around more men like that, right? And I want to be around more women like that. And so that's been that shift was, it's not really about me. I'm here for service, and the more service I can do, which is what makes me appear like I'm spread thin. But I feel like when I'm there, like I'm here with you guys right now, totally and completely, I'm not thinking about another thing. And so when I'm on a rescue, I'm not thinking about another thing. If I'm working, a case in domestic violence, I'm there for that moment. If I'm with a business owner with their problems, I'm there. If I'm with my kids, I'm totally 100% present. It's not about quantity. It's about quality when you're with your kids, being there, not answering the phone, right? Not just being there and being with them and asking them questions and giving them lessons in those moments. It's the presence, at that event that we were at in Hollywood, the year before, Halle Berry, who I wasn't a great big fan of, right? She taught me an amazing lesson. Because I wasn't a big fan, but I was standing in line to get a picture with her and whatnot. And I got into her presence, and I turned into like a 16-year-old boy. Like, I was like, what is happening to me right now? I'm like, Hallie, not a big fan. But she is so present, right? She's so present with people. And I saw that, and I was like, man, that's something that I'd love to emulate. It's, again, picking up little things from people along the way. And the more presence you can give people, the more of a gift you're going to give them. One last story. There's a book called the Survivors Club, and in that book, there's this story of this guy that left his house. He decided that he wanted to end his life, and got on a trolley and took a taxi, and he's crying and and feeling really horrible, and got on a trolley bus. Like all these things, and then walked out onto the bridge and actually jumped, survived the fall, and lived to tell about it. But said, and I'm sorry at this point, I don't know if it was a man or woman, and said when he was interviewed, what were you thinking? And he said, if one person would have said, hey, what's wrong? I wouldn't have jumped. Now it's not, putting that responsibility on somebody else, but how many people in our own lives are thinking about jumping? Are thinking about making bad decisions, drinking, drugs, sex, too much food, actual suicide. How many people in our lives that live in our own homes are thinking these things, and just a simple, hey, I love you, right? How you doing? Tell me about your day, right? And being present for other people instead of being buried in our own garbage is such a gift to the world, right? And how many people can we save or light their inspiration for innovation that can, ultimately change our world by just being present instead of letting screens rule our lives or whatever it is. I think that's a great lesson for all of us. Something I need to be reminded of all the time is to be present.
So I'm kind of fascinated by some of these rescues that you're doing and some of the other things it sounds like you're doing. Talk to us about, how did you ever get involved in that, and why is it a passion of yours?
Again, my big passion has always been domestic violence because of my upbringing. And I get invited to a lot of fundraisers or to go speak and raise money for stuff. And I got invited to a screening of a movie about trafficking. And it shocked me. I mean, I've seen a lot of things, I was raised by basically a gangster, I've seen a lot of things, but trafficking a child, as young as 8 months for the purpose of somebody using them for sex, it broke something inside of me when I watched this. And I left that event, and I was like, what is going on? How can this possibly be going on? And then I was reading about like how often, 500,000-600,000 kids in the United States, there's 10 million kids around the world that are being trafficked, either for labor or for sex. And I'm thinking to myself, what happened to our world? Where are the men at right? Where are the people that are stepping up for these people? And I couldn't go home. Again, I've got 5 kids and 3 of them are girls, and I couldn't go home. So I parked at Sugar House Park, and I just cried. I'm not a big crier, but I was like, something broke. I was like, this is terrible, and cried. And the sun came up, and I did a Facebook Live, and I said, I don't know what to do. I don't, this is what I just saw. But I'm going to do something. And then somebody saw that and invited me on to go undercover. They're like, hey, we know your background. We know you've got some skill set. Do you want to go with us and go do a rescue? And I was like, sign me up, sign me up. And so that was the start of it. And God, Pastor Rudy and I, the biggest text that we send back and forth with each other is God is hilarious, right? God is hilarious. All of the things that were meant to break me gave me the skill sets to free other people. My business acumen frees business owners. What do they do then? They have more money to donate or a passion that they want to follow, or they're more present with their kids, or they're not going to commit suicide because they're, whatever's going on in their mind. The domestic violence, the rescuing kids, the feeding people, all of the stuff that I went through as a child, standing in line with my mom for government cheese and that nasty powdered milk, and not having any food, having to walk dirt roads for asparagus for dinner, those kinds of things put me and prepared me exactly perfectly for when I decided to answer the call on my life. And I believe if people are struggling right now, if they're drinking, if they're eating too much, if they're in a bad relationship, if they're anything that they're struggling right now, is because that they have stuff down inside of them, the greatness that all of those struggles used as building, that should be used as building blocks for service. That's just stuff down inside of them that's making them sick. And I believe that if people would just recognize, hey, I went through all of that stuff for a reason. What is it? It was for service. Okay. What service can I do? Right? What can I do? Be present with my kids. If you let that start to get out, you start to heal yourself. Right. And a healed human being, Pastor Rudy has this saying that a slave cannot free another slave. And that hit me so hard. I thought about it for a couple of days, and I was like, man, a lot of us we're slaves to porn. We're slaves to alcohol. We're slaves to the opinions of other people that are around us, right? We're slaves to the work that we started to free ourselves, which has made us bigger slaves. Like, there's so much enslavement that we've allowed ourselves, and the key's in our right-hand pocket, right? Or if you're left-handed, it's in your left-hand pocket. Or if you have no hands, it's where your mouth can reach it, right? It's right there. It's right in front of us. So I'll keep talking.
Yeah, I know. I know you will. And I want to be able to give you adequate time to answer the question that we always ask at the end of the podcast.
Okay.
So unless you have a short question, I want to give Jason some time
that sounds good. You can tell that we're listening with the intent to listen, not ask the next question.
It's admirable. But you guys are
because
really
you're so engaging. That's why.
It's like I get lost. You
get done, and I'm like, process. Well, wait, I don't have any thought in my mind at all. I'm just intently listening to this guy who's awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
So, Jason, you've listened to the podcast before, and you know that the origins of the Gentleman Project. The one thing we always ask at the end of the podcast is, what do you think it means to be a gentleman?
You're just going to drop that on me.
I'm going to drop that on you.
You can
and
think
if you need a minute, I edit this whole thing like every split second.
Good. You can take out my cuss word then. It wasn't me saying it. I was repeating.
Usually that's me.
I appreciate the restraint. You've been able to really express yourself quite well today.
I'm in your home, and I'm going to respect it.
And you know what I really love about that? I don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. But people that I went to high school with that didn't live my lifestyle, didn't have my faith, my beliefs, or anything, they did the same thing.
Yeah.
They'd pull into my driveway, in their big old jacked up S10 Blazers with Bone Thugs and Harmony blaring.
Right.
They'd turn it off so my mom and dad and me wouldn't hear it.
Right.
And we'd listen to country music or something the whole time. And then they'd pull out of my driveway and I'd hear Bone Thugs and Harmony start back up again.
Right.
And I don't know what that is. It's just like an unspoken thing. Like I've never said, Jason, I don't like it when you swear around me.
Right. But I don't.
I want my mom to be able to listen to this podcast.
Right.
Though.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of my stuff, my own podcast, you can't, it's like, get the kids away,
Well, and that's your brand and that's who you are. And I don't judge you for that.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that we talked about, like that's one of the things Corey really liked about your presentation down in Hollywood.
Yeah. Was the
because
customers.
It's just real. It's
You're
raw.
just real.
Yeah.
You're authentic. You can tell that in our podcast right now too. You're just an authentic guy. And that comes, I think, from what you've been through and this purposeful way that you have about you of saying, okay, you had an aha moment somewhere along the way and you said, wait, all this stuff that happened to me, all the things that most people would look and just say, I got the crap beat out of me.
Yeah.
Not just physically, but I mean, in a million different ways. Right. And you just turned it into, I'm going to make all those strengths.
Right.
That just makes you very authentic.
Thank you. I think a lot of people, the people that complain, and I don't do it as much because I understand the impact that cussing has on people's ears. Right. And so I don't do it as much anymore, but I'm not, if there's a moment where I think it belongs, then I'm going to say it because I believe that a lot of people, and I've noticed this, the people that are like, oh, you cussed, and then I dig, like I'm very interested. Like what? Okay. I didn't mean to offend you, but let's dig into your life. And then you see, oh, they just cheated on their wife and they're addicted to alcohol and so you're not being authentic. Right. That's the thing that makes us sick is when you're not being authentic. And I'm not going to say, I want to be more accepted in a world like, as Christians and believers, we're supposed to be different than the world. Right. Which when you tell me that about Moses, like there's two sides of it. Number one, I don't ever disrespect anybody's home. Like I think that's, you don't walk into somebody else's house and just start dropping F-bombs because it's who I am. No, you have responsibility to be, if I'm in your environment, you come into my environment, you want to drop a couple of F-bombs at my listeners are going to be like, cool, but it's that inauthenticity, right? The people that are the most inauthentic tend to be the ones that are the most judgmental. Right. And so that was, the reason behind it is not that I just want to cuss to say, hey, it's me and you're going to have to deal with it. But that's one of the sides of it.
Well, you spent some time with Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how Tony uses his language.
Right.
Right.
All the time.
I
mean, the first event I went to.
Get your attention. Like,
bro, I was counting like in the first 45 minutes of his presentation, I counted like 72 F-bombs. And I'm like, what is going on? Right. Cause I still had that inauthenticity, the fear, right? Because a lot of us put on this show for everybody else because it's what the world tells us that we want to see. They don't see in our minds, everybody's messed up. Here's the thing that I understand now, right? Everybody's screwed up and we're all screwed up in different ways. But the authenticity of speaking in the moment is more powerful than putting on a glossy appearance. Right. It affects and impacts more people, which is what we're here for. Yeah. And your presence, being in your presence and, with the story you just told me, it's like Moses. What did they do? They became silent around Moses. Why? Respect. Right. It's respect. And that respect isn't somebody coming in and saying, I'm the president of this and I'm rich here and I'm not. And that's, that is an inauthentic version of power, which is what is causing so much sickness around the world in all governments right now. It's it's positional strength rather than example driven, right? You do the things that I do. I'm screwed up, you're screwed up, but let's try to do better for our world. And so I think that your presence and your authenticity and not cussing and your authenticity and how you live your life is just as powerful as my authenticity or your authenticity in being who we are when we are, the people we are. That commands respect. And I think that's to get back to your question, that's a big piece of being a gentleman, right? Being a gentleman. I'll give you an example in 2 relationships that I had in my life. My first marriage, I thought being a gentleman was doing everything that my wife wanted me to do, right? It was, there's a strength in masculinity, and our society does not reward that these days. But in my first marriage, I was very, because of my upbringing, I wanted to be exactly the opposite. And so some of the strength from being an authentic man and actually understanding your role in the family and the strength that should come from that and the leadership that you should provide, not being that I'm the man in the family and you're going to do exactly what I'm told, but there has to be a strength that says, hey, this isn't right. Hey, we're not going to go down that road. Hey, our children are going to do this. Our children are going to do that. I didn't know that in my first relationship. Right. And so I was what I thought was being strong was being weak. Right. And it caused, of course, she's going to go cheat on me. Of course. Right. I mean, I'm just basically a roommate. I'm another female friend. And it was nowhere else in my life was I feminine except for in that relationship. And then, I learned all these lessons, and now the relationship I'm in now, with the young lady that I'm about to marry, it's a different role, and it's a different strength, but it's still in service. Right? It's not a positional thing. So being a gentleman, I believe, is really looking around at the world around you and seeking opportunities to make people smile. Right? It's seeking the moments to be of service to people that are sad or upset or, they're going through a struggle. It's being present and paying attention to everything around you to see, hey, they responded a little, is everything okay? Are you okay? What's going on? And then giving them, when they do engage, you're looking for giving them the thing, love them enough to risk their like of you, right? Saying the things that need to be said in love. Right? That's a true gentleman to me. Somebody that is not saying things to hurt people or lord over their intellect or whatever it may be, but it's to say the things that people need to hear. Our coaches, you can't be a coach and yell at a kid and tell him to, get off his tail and all these other kind of things right now, which is exactly what that child probably needs in the moment, right? Is that sort of love. And if you do all of that, if you come from that space, then I believe that's what a gentleman does, is they come from love. They come from service. They come from understanding we're also not perfect. I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep educating myself. And when I'm wrong, immediately admit it, right? That's also being part of a gentleman, is don't, make the case when you've come up against something, when you're wrong. Right? With our women, with our kids, with, our employees or with our bosses or whoever it may be, we know when we're wrong, and you garner more respect as a gentleman to say, you know what, you're actually right, which was very difficult for me to learn. Very difficult. So those are the components. I believe it's it's a series of patterns that we learn. I believe we learn it from other gentlemen. Right? We're always iron sharpens iron. I believe that we should always be around each other, hanging out with each other and calling our child, not in love, again, calling each other out on the decisions that we're making. And if we're making a bad decision, for somebody to say, hey, let's stop and think about this. Why are you, what is missing in your marriage that makes you want to go outside of it? Right? What is missing in your life that you need to drink alcohol? What is missing in your life that you're addicted to porn? If somebody's, tells you that, hey, these are the things that that are going on in my life, that's a place of reverence when somebody trusts you with information, right? I mean, in our consulting company, I've seen it all. I've seen it all, because that's a place where people spend more time than they do with their own family. And I've seen it all. And if I was to say, go out and broadcast that stuff, it's a breach of trust. And so there's a sacred place where people, when they do trust you, you honor that, right? And you serve the best you can and keep your mouth shut, and don't don't say rumors or, call people out or do whatever it is publicly, but keep that relationship in that sacred place pure.
You got to write a book on that answer. It's a good one.
What a great podcast this has been.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for your insight and for taking the time.
My pleasure.
We know how busy you are.
Yep.
Sir, in service.
Yes. Got to go. I'm heading here to go to a plane.
Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for listening to the podcast. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do so. We'd love to have you over there and drop us a review. I checked out the reviews yesterday, and they look great. Our downloads are doing great as well. So thanks for sharing the podcast. If you had a prompting today during the podcast to share something that you heard with somebody that you love, follow that prompting, act on each good thought. I'm Kirk Chugg.
I'm Corey Moore. Thanks for listening.